Okay, so let's say you own a WRX or an STI, I don't care what year it is, and you want to modify your car. Well, in this video, we're going to go over all of the parts people regret buying. And this isn't just from somebody that's been in the community forever. This is somebody that owns a parts business in the Subaru world. So I am, let's say, legitimately an expert in this, and we're going to go through basically the most common parts people regret buying, and I'm going to talk about why. And I'm hopefully going to save you guys not just a couple $100s, but thousands and thousands of dollars over your Subaru ownership experience, because there are a ton of mods out there that don't actually do anything to the car. They're harder to maintain and they break and they can be very, very expensive. There is some serious regret in this industry. And not only am I going to tell you why they regret it and like all that stuff, I'll give you guys an actionable, like, don't buy these parts if you don't want to deal with these headaches. So this video will be full of information and fairly juicy, because we're going to talk about some stuff that a lot of people are like, you should definitely do that. And I'm about to tell you why you should not do that. Now, before we get into my WRX, and we're going to do a little bit of driving while we talk about this video, right below my face is this button that says subscribe. If you haven't already clicked it, I would really appreciate you clicking that. It's absolutely free to do. You will make my day. One step further, I have a big announcement coming to this channel. I may or may not have bought in a car with a blown engine. I may or may not be doing a full teardown build, high horsepower and show car, like everything, every nut and bolt. Not going to tell you guys too much, but I can tell you in about a month, you're going to start seeing those videos. The reason it's about a month out is it's taking me so long to make them, because they're going to be like hour-plus videos. It'll be the most fun thing that I've ever brought to this channel. That's why you should hit subscribe. But let's hop into the car and talk about you not wasting your money and not regretting stupid mods. All right, so what do people regret buying? And this is a big one. So again, I own a performance parts shop, or I own an automotive shop for Subarus, and there's a lot of regret, unfortunately. People regret buying stuff all the time. All right, first one is going to be something that's really common to buy for a couple of reasons, but it's gonna be single exit exhausts. A lot of people buy single exit exhausts because they're cheaper. And then they get around WRXs that have, you know, quad exit exhaust or dual exit exhaust, and they realize that they don't sound the same. Single exit exhausts tend to also be the highest drone producing exhausts, and they don't sound as good as the other exhausts. From a performance standpoint as well, a lot of people think that they perform better, and in certain situations they do, but a good quad tip exhaust will perform better than a single exit. Giving this thing a little gas. Oh, this car is so, well, this car is powerful. Yeah, super common to have single exit exhausts be something that people replace over time, whether it's because of sound issues or they just realize that, you know, well, it's usually sound issues, and they buy them because they're cheaper, and then people regret not investing the only couple $100 extra to get a little bit more material on your exhaust. Number 2 on our list is actually something that can both cause a problem and affect performance, and it's going to be cheaping out and buying an intake for your WRX or STI that doesn't have a heat shield or a thermal box, meaning quite literally an enclosure around the filter. There's a few manufacturers that make exhausts, or you can even buy them without the heat shield. And you just won't get the performance gains out of that, and it's a lot of people regret it, and whether you buy one that you can then buy a shield for or not, one, if you can buy a shield for, most people end up buying a shield because their tuner asks them to do it, but otherwise it's almost like it doesn't make enough power to even make sense doing. Like if you're not going to buy a heat shield, you may as well not modify your intake. So it's the most common part people actually have to then replace again. It's very, very common to have to buy another one because you bought the wrong one. All right, here we go. Here's one that's going to cause you headaches and doesn't really do much, and it's cheaping out on coilovers. Most people think aftermarket coilovers are aftermarket coilovers, and they will give you performance increases, and just any set of aftermarket coilovers is good. There's 2 reasons that's incorrect. One, aftermarket coilers that are cheap or not well built could actually break on you during installation. I've seen this all the time. Top head threaded bolts, shear, all kinds of problems can happen. And that's not necessarily cheap, doesn't mean money-wise. Great example is, and you guys fight me in the comment section, Faction Fab makes wonderful coilovers, and they don't charge people very much for them. They're much better than some of their competitors that are $1,000, $1,200, $1,400. The $700, $800, $900 Faction Fabs are going to be better sets of coilovers. They're just well made, and I can tell you after seeing volume of them. But people think that they're physically cheap. They're monetarily cheaper, so there must be lesser coilovers. I mean cheap in build quality, not in actual cost, because those 2 things do not line up. Great example is the company that I own, JXR Performance. I will die on the hill that I sell the best parts that I make relative to all my competitors. and I sell them for like 40% the cost. And the only reason I do that is because I think that other people are scamming you out of your money. You know, like, I refuse to have 200% margins on my parts. I want to keep normal product part margins of trying to get 20% if I'm lucky. And if I do that, you guys get parts for half the cost. So that should be a reflection across the entire industry. The other thing is, cheap coilovers don't do very much in your car. Maybe you get some drop on them, but that's about it. You really need to spend some really good money to get well-built coilovers to get the actual suspension benefits out of them. All right, controversy. You guys are gonna roast me, but expensive wheels. Buy replicas. You know, there is absolutely no reason, unless you're absolutely in love with a set of wheels, to spend a bunch of money on them. Most people think that cheap wheels are going to last lesser time. And I will objectively say that you're wrong, because what ends up happening is most people at some point in their life have a problem. They either curb their wheels, something hits their wheel, it damages it, and they replace it. This happens so much more often than a wheel having a problem from putting hundreds of thousands of miles on it, that it's an absolute misnomer. And it's a pretty common misconception, honestly, that the idea of buying, you know, more expensive wheels gonna outlast the living wear and tear. Now, again, like, I've broken wheels before, and people always are like, well, that's why you shouldn't buy cheap wheels. But honestly, like, the few times I've broken wheels, I've, like, concrete fell off a truck once and I drove over it. Expensive wheels are gonna bend. You know, like, so might I crack my wheel. The same thing would happen with an expensive wheel. It's not, the short answer is, people end up regretting it because they'll spend $3,000 on a set of wheels, and then they'll have a small problem and they'll end up having to replace a wheel and tire for like $800-900, where if you buy cheaper wheels that are replicas, or, you know, that still are interesting to you, you know, if I break a wheel, it's like, you know, wheel and tire is like $300, right? I mean, this is the basic, like, big regret. People, I see it all the time. People buy really expensive wheels and then they end up on the used on Facebook Marketplace because they want to go down to cheaper wheels, because they don't want the headache of having to, like, be constantly super aware of their wheels. The next one's really easy. Carbon fiber hoods. People regret them for a couple reasons, and, you know, they're great cosmetically, but they don't do anything other than looks, right? There's no function of them. And on top of that, there's two big pieces. The wear and tear and the upkeep of them is super high. One, anytime something bounces in the highway and hits your hood, you've got to be a lot more cautious of it, because it's not like buffing, or you can't put a little, like, touch-up paint, right? It's carbon fiber, it's going to be there forever. But two, the clear coat on these carbon fiber things, and the way carbon fiber sits in the sun in terms of clear coat and having to do that, you're gonna, like, my general rule of thumb is, when I tell, like, a customer that's buying a carbon fiber hood, right, I tell them just to clear coat it anyways, like, put additional clear coat on it before they put it in their car. It doesn't last as long. You have to upkeep it in a very specific way. You can't really let them sit in the sun the same way as you can a stock car, so it's more inconvenient for very marginal use. That being said, they're also extremely expensive, and then, you know, it's hard to have one that doesn't have any damage. They drop in price if you ever want to sell in the used market quite a lot. So it's just one of those ones where you could sink easily $1,300-1,400, maybe $1,600 with an additional clear coat into it, and then just have to think about it every time you drive, store your car, park your car, you know, you name it, you're thinking about it. All right, next on our list is wrapping your car. It's less common with WRXs, but usually people that drive WRXs or STIs, when they wrap their car, money is more of a question, so they go with somebody that's cheaper to wrap their car, and a couple things happen. It's very, very common to see folks with actual cut marks on their car. It ruins their paint. It's way more common than you'd actually think. You know, when you wrap your car, do not go with the cheapest option. Go with somebody that's really reputable, or wrap it yourself. A cheap wrap, and even just like a lower cost wrap, is never a good sign. And if you keep it on your car for a long time, people aren't aware that you have to care for your car differently. You can't just leave it in the sun. There are things you have to be aware of. You can't just leave it on there forever. Wrap is only good on the car for a while before the adhesive starts to do negative things both to your paint and for the removal of the wrap. Wrap is not as simple as most people think it is, and sometimes painting it is the better way to go. But a lot of people regret wrap, and they don't regret it until it becomes a really, really expensive headache. Okay, functionality thing that could tank your engine potentially that people just don't know about: blow-off valves. Blow-off valves, because people think that they sound cool and so many platforms can run them, they want to put a blow-off valve on their car. I get so many people who buy blow-off valves through my site that I end up emailing them first. I don't send them the part until I email them and say, has your tuner approved this? Do you understand how it works? Yeah, because there are some cars, like you can do certain things to these cars or put a universal blow-off valve on them, and that's usually what it is. Somebody will buy like a universal HKS or, you know, whatever it is, and they're like, oh yeah, to fit my car, it's the same millimeter attachment style or whatever it is. But they don't really understand. These cars do not respond well to ambient vac, right? They have to be complete bypass. Even a hybrid, you know, with the right tuning, your car could struggle with that, right? So there's some things to think about, right? You really need to think about it. You'll have starting issues, spark issues, ignition issues, you know, you'll have AFR, air fuel issues. The classic is, you know, maybe 2015 through 2019 when these cars were coming out, everybody wanted the tss sound, and people were having all kinds of starting issues with their WRXs that they couldn't figure out, and it was all their blow-off valves. So general rule of thumb, just stay away from them. And if you have, like, I know that the bypass is this plastic little flimsy thing that everyone's like, oh my God, it's gonna break. It doesn't break that often. And I can tell you as somebody that supplies replacements for people, they don't break that often, and don't replace it until it breaks. And if it does, talk to your tuner or do some research or email someone like me where I can tell you what's the safe way to do it. But always the safe answer is just don't vac to ambient, right? Do not let any actual pressure off. And you're probably fine, but even some of those hybrid ones are suspect. All right, 2 left on our list. Cheap tires. Just don't buy cheap tires. There's enough said. You're gonna blow through them. It's an all-wheel drive car. You're gonna have unusual wear patterns, which will cause you to have more alignments, which will make the cheap tires really expensive because alignments are expensive when they add up. Just buy good, reputable tires with long mileage runs and rotate them as needed. Cheap tires also have significantly worse performance in terms of what a tire should do from a performance perspective. So, you know, buy a decent set of tires. You will spend less money. That should be, we'll leave it at that, because I could talk forever about tires. You will spend significantly less money buying a decent set of tires. The last one on our list, and this is the one that you guys are going to hate the most, is engine dress up. All the little stuff that you put inside your engine bay. Unless you've got a show car, don't buy engine dress up. It's really, really, really common when people are like, I really want to mod my car. I got $100, I got $150, what can I buy? Well, you can buy engine dress up, which is usually just formed sheet metal and powder coating on it. And yeah, it's a lot of fun to install. It feels really good to be like, oh, I put a mod on my car, right? And then you'll never see it again, right? It's so funny when I talk to people that have $400 of engine dress up or $700 of engine dress up. I ask them, how often do you look at it? And they'll tell me like 3 or 4 times a year. So I'm like, okay, so your engine dress up cost you $200 a look, right? And when you think about it that way, it then becomes a little silly to have it.